and then pass. Oh, I love this notification. It's a good signal that everything is started correctly. So we'll record this session. And hi, everyone who's able to join. Today, we'll have our new R&D talk. I want to remind you that it's an online meetup from SoftServe R&D, where different specialists in deep technologies join to share the latest technology trends as well as innovations around specific global problems. And today's session isn't an exception. I would say we'll tackle quite big problem that intersect with the sustainability problem. When there are a lot of rumors around how much energy consume large language models, there are much more influential sustainability challenges. And today we'll talk about one that create around 30% of all human-caused global warming. And it's around greenhouse gases, and MethaneX is one of the most potent. And we'll cover all of the aspects from technological advance in the field that might be leveraged to help to detect and quantify the amount of methane that is produced by different sources, to the how this process might be automated and improved using newest technologies. And I encourage you to ask questions during the session. We will answer all of them on the Q&A session in the end. And let me introduce our speakers. We'll have 3 speakers today. And the first one is Mykola Yanovsky. He's our R&D lead at SoftServe. Just last month finished his PhD, focuses on deep learning and computer vision in fields like climate tech and agrotech. Then Jack Cherevko, he's R&D product owner who is working with different deep technologies in the area of climate tech and biotech, and basically MethaneX is one of the important direction for us at R&D at all. And of course, our well-known Hatem Nazar, who is industry success leader at SoftServe in the oil and gas industry. I would say he's leading expert in digital transformation, and during his 25 years of experience, he's done a lot of them. So I believe today's conversation would be both exciting and technically broad. So encourage everyone one more time to ask the question and pass the stage to the speakers and share the screen.
Hello. So I will be starting today's talk. My name is Jack. I'm a product manager for MethaneX project, and today I will be opening our session with first point of agenda. If you next slide, please, for the agendas. So just a quick overview of today's talk. I will be presenting a quick business overview of MethaneX, methane problem, global warming, and why this project exists and for what purposes it exists. Then Mykola will cover technical overview of the project, how it's done under the hood, and what are the technical aspects of the solution. And then we'll finish with Hatem on summary and next steps and upcoming initiatives regarding MethaneX for the SoftServe. So yeah, let's start with the business overview. And I want to start with a couple of a bit depressive slides, to be honest. So the first one is, I think everyone saw the statistics on global warming over the recent years, and there is this huge news that couple of recent years has been officially reported to be the hottest ones, and the global warming is all-time high, and it's already finally started to be recognized by the governments, by the companies, and a lot of people and a lot of organizations start making small or large steps in the direction of decreasing global warming effect. And usually when we start speaking of global warming, we start speaking of greenhouse gases. And when we start speaking of greenhouse gases, we usually talk about CO2, carbon emissions. And if you've seen any of the recent presentation by Apple, Google, any other tech giants, you all heard that they are focusing on being carbon neutral, on decreasing their carbon footprint. And that's a great initiative, but let's not forget that carbon emission and carbon CO2 is not the only greenhouse gas that affects global warming. And like the second contestant in this field of harming the environment is methane, which is, next slide is, as we can see, methane is all-time high together with CO2 and global warming, which all correlated. And methane, while it has slightly less long-term effects than CO2 on the environment, it's up to 25 to 30% more potent and more harmful in the short term. And as we can see, like recent years have been all-time high for the methane. And regarding to the reports, it's 60% of all methane emissions are results of the human activities. So it's, on one side, it's bad news. On the other side, there is a lot we can do to decrease methane emissions and work with it in the long term and in short term both. So our motivation for this project, to summarize, was that global methane emissions originate from a large number of sources, and most of them are related to human activity. So it can be tackled, it can be conquested with technology and right approach to figuring out how much emissions is emitted by different companies and how to produce it, how to prevent it from happening. Methane itself is 25 times more potent than CO2 and other greenhouse gases. Also, the issue that methane is invisible to human eyes, so there is no other way than with technological advancement like satellite images on US infrared cameras to detect it properly, and so forth to report it and calculate. So based on that, our goal was to create an all-around solution that enables both detection, quantification, and reporting of methane for oil and gas industry. And while oil and gas industry is because, as you can see, most methane sources, comparing their prominence, is wetlands, it's natural source of methane. I'm not sure, to be honest, if there are a lot of initiatives on decreasing or reusing methane from wetlands, but two of the next contestants are agriculture and energy. Those are both human produced. I mean, agriculture is produced by cattle, obviously, but those two industries create the most methane emissions around the globe. And while agriculture is one of the most important fields, energy is currently our focus because of the newest regulations, because of the approaches the oil and gas companies are taking as initiatives that have been created in this field, and how drastic those changes will be happening in the nearest future. So we decided to focus on oil and gas companies in the energy sector because, if you can go to next slide real quick. Because energy, it contributes to 38% of total methane emissions. So it's a huge player in methane emission field, and emission detection for all of the fields is very complex and difficult, but for oil and gas, it's especially complicated because of the last bullet points that methane emissions across the entire oil and gas asset chain. So from manufacturing, from mining oil and gas to transportation to storing, all of those parts of the journey can lead to different emissions. Some of them are inevitable, but most of them are due to different leaks and issues and functioning of the different facilities. So, and the main point here regarding the business standpoint and the regulations is that US government is committed right now to decreasing methane emissions to 87% by 2030, which is like the level of 2005. So, and it's, to be honest, it's not a spread and not a slow process, because we have like 6 years to decrease it very significantly. So oil and gas companies are in real rush right now to decrease their methane emissions as soon as possible and as fast as possible and as efficient as possible. And that leads to our next slide with from the business perspective, we see that the calculated investment that is required for all oil and gas sector to meet those requirements from the US government and different governments across the globe is around 600 billion. So basically we can count as our attainable market for all the solutions related to methane emission rate calculation, prediction, and investigation. So this is basically the market that has been grown up recently. It's fairly new one, and this is the estimate that we put for ourselves. So a bit more data on how business already approaches this issue. So as we can see, plans on reduce methane emissions is almost as popular and most expected and as expected between the companies as CO2 emissions, partly because CO2 is already, there are a lot of strategies. It has been in the conversation for a while comparing to methane. That's why more and more companies, and as we see, even more small firms are thinking of and planning actually and investing into reducing methane emissions. And among large firms, like 65% of the companies are already planning to reduce methane emissions in the nearest future to accommodate the regulations of the US government. And regarding the amount of reduction, we see that most companies are planning to reduce more than 10%. Some of, like, if you see, this is the most prominent and the most popular point for all of the companies in the oil and gas industry. So they are planning to reduce it fast, and they are planning to reduce it significantly, because more than 10% in even if a couple of years, it's a significant amount to reduce and work with. So to summarize the business side of the question, so methane is one of the most prominent topics in the industry up to today, and it expects very significant investments from oil and gas companies all over the next couple of years to tackle it and to prevent the companies from fees and different charges for the over emission of methane. So net zero and decarbonization commitment across all companies in the industry, it's status quo for not only for oil and gas companies, but for most of the manufacturing and overall organization around the world. New EPA and IRA regulations, so imposing big penalties. So currently, for the next in 2024, it will be around $900 per metric ton of methane, and it will be up to $1,500 per cubic ton in 2030 or 2030. Yeah. So the penalties are quite high, and it's not a thing to play with for the oil and gas companies and to take slightly and easily. So it's a huge penalties for the companies that will be under-reporting methane or over-emitting it. And solutions are not quite clearly defined. So there is no monopoly on the market. There's still a lot of companies trying to fix all the methane-related problems in the market, but still it's comparatively blue ocean for new companies such as SoftServe and other competitors. So there is a lot of place to find a competitive edge in this field. And yeah, and it requires integration of many different solutions. That's why we're talking about it as a part of R&D talk, because it's not a very straightforward process. It requires integration of a lot of different technologies, and Nikolai will tell in more details the extent of technological fields that needed to work with methane and report it properly and estimate it properly. Yeah, so to summarize, because the challenges that MethaneX is addressing with its solution is, first of all, the accuracy of methane emissions measurements. So to report it properly, to accurately measure it, there are a lot of different ways and technologies that can do it to provide the highest accuracy of measurements. And one technology is never enough, because there are a lot of different ways. It can be satellites, it can be drones, it can be just measuring, understanding the equipment that you have and measuring average number of emissions per equipment. But the ideal way to properly measure methane emissions is to combine a couple of different technologies. And with combining it, there is always a problem of integration, those data from different producer sources of estimation into one system that will work properly for you and provide you a clear picture of how much methane your company is actually emitting per year, per day, and so on. Obviously, managing uncertainty measurements, because it's actual oil and gas plants and factories, and a lot of things can happen. A lot of things changes throughout the day, not to mention throughout the year. Methane plume propagation to nearby areas. So not only we need to understand how much methane is emitted, we also need to understand with the current wind situation where it's going and what potential harm can it cause to the nearby ecosystems. So obviously, accuracy of emission models, identifying missing measurements and need for additionality. So when we talk with clients, we try to understand what kind of technologies do they have on hand, what are they still missing, do they need some more tools to properly measure methane emissions on the spot. Besides just leak detection and understanding what emits methane, we need to provide companies with a clear plan on how to repair all the leaks, how to efficiently work with all the issues, how to repair them in a timely manner, and to prevent them from happening in the future. So emission rate prediction is also an important thing for the companies to understand not only how much are they emitting right now, or last months, but how much methane will they be emitting in the nearest future to be able to predict if it works fine with regulations that are constantly changing and evolving and becoming more and more strict. And finally, all of that should be reported to the EPA guidelines, or different companies in different regions have different reports that they need to fill on monthly basis, quarterly basis, or yearly basis. So all of the information from methane detection technologies, from all the data that we gather, should be properly compiled into guidelines, into reports, and sent to the government. So this is a set of challenges that MethaneX is working on and addressing for our potential clients. And that's all from my side on this slide. And I'm passing the microphone to Mikolai to tell you more about what's under the hood and how the technology is actually working. Thank you.
Thank you, Jack. Yeah, hi everyone. My name is Mikołaj Jankowski, and I'm an R&D lead. And yeah, I was working on this MethaneX initiative since the beginning, so I feel really happy that I'm here to share some details with you. And I will cover the technical part, just going into details of some technologies that we developed under the hood of MethaneX. And remember, when Jack told you that methane is invisible to human eyes, so we have to leverage the technology to observe it. And this is exactly what I'm going to start with. So we will try to kind of tackle this problem of how we can observe the invisible methane. And like that was said before, standard visible light spectrum isn't enough to see methane. The spectrum, like the standard visible light, is between 380 to 700 nanometers. And this is, yeah, definitely you won't see any methane within the spectrum. But the fun part begins when we start to look into the infrared spectrum, which is way more sensitive to the presence of methane plumes. So here in the image, we can see how methane transmittance changes under different wavelengths of light. So transmittance of 1 indicates that the light of this particular wavelength that is indicated on the x-axis will not let all the light through. I mean, sorry, the transmittance of 1 means that it will let all the light through. However, lower values of the transmittance mean that the ray of light at that particular wavelength will be absorbed, reflected, scattered by methane. So not all the light will pass through the methane, and this is exactly what we need to observe the methane. So this sort of features will appear as a darker spots on infrared images captured by different cameras. So the main idea is to use a sensor that is sensitive only to a particular spectrum of light that can be used to see methane. So as you probably realize, building such sensors that record spectral bands in this invisible spectrum is quite a bit of investment. And this is why such advanced sensors are usually available only for the satellites. And those satellites, you know, they circulate around the Earth, they collect the data, and the data provided by the satellites have become really crucial for many areas of our life, like weather predictions or, you know, estimating the effect of some natural disasters. So because the satellites are being often equipped with these fancy multispectral sensors, satellites are great for detecting methane as well. Another benefit of using satellites for this task is that they constantly circulate around the Earth, and they can revisit a given place frequently and repeat the measurements if we need it. On the other hand, the drawbacks of using satellites stem from the fact that they have to capture all of the images from you know, pretty far away the surface, which impacts their spatial resolution. So this means, for example, that every pixel registered by the satellite might correspond to an area of, let's say, 20 by 20 meters, which is obviously not that good. Another downside of using satellites in general is that they're pretty sensitive to cloud coverage. Essentially, when we have high cloud coverage, you won't see anything because it will cover the view of the satellite. So during cloudy days, this is almost impossible to collect any meaningful data. Despite the drawbacks I mentioned, the satellites are still commonly used to collect this imagery of the Earth's surface. Okay, So like I mentioned, satellites suffer with this spatial resolution a bit. And the spatial resolution is the crucial factor that determines the area covered by a single pixel that is acquired by the satellite. So the spatial resolution depends on multiple factors, like the resolution of the sensor that is used by the satellite, or the distance from the Earth that was at which the satellite was when capturing this image. So here you can see an example provided by our great partner, Satellytics, and we can see that there's a high-quality RGB image underneath and a color map representing concentration of methane that is overlaid on top of this RGB image. We can see that using a spatial resolution of 100 by 100 meters per pixel would result in acquiring only 8 pixels of the data for this particular facility that we have here. When we improve towards 25 by 25 meters per pixel, this is already a big step. But the results provided by the final satellite, which is a state-of-the-art one, and it's called WorldView 3, and provides the data at 3.7 by 3.7 meters per pixel, this is necessary to have this full picture of how severe are the methane leaks and what equipment is responsible for this particular leak. So obviously, you probably already figured out that the better quality data we purchase, the more expensive it will get. But sometimes this is really necessary step for certain applications, like associating particular equipment types with the methane leaks. All right. Along spatial resolution, which is far from perfect in most of the satellites, we also have to deal with some so-called spectral resolution. So the spectral resolution is really the ability of the sensor to distinguish between different wavelengths or colors of this electromagnetic spectrum. It's like the way to see beyond just RGB as human eyes do. Of course, the higher spectral resolution, the more finely the satellite can slice the spectrum into so-called bands. So imagine if you have like your eyes really sharp, so that you can really distinguish between different shades of colors. In a similar way, a satellite with high spectral resolution might be able to tell the difference between shades of green in a forest, which may in turn help scientists to figure out the health of the plants, or let's say detect specific materials on the ground. So with satellites in general, we can go way beyond the visible RGB spectrum. And this is exactly what we need for seeing methane's presence. So whenever the satellite provides us the data, it provides us as a form of these hyperspectral cubes. So these cubes are similar to RGB images. So they have certain width, they have certain height, and they have 3 channels RGB. So for hyperspectral cubes, we have also some width, some height, but the number of channels is way higher than just RGB because they register more frequency bands. So basically the number of channels available in this hyperspectral cube is determined by the number of the spectral bands registered by the satellite. Again, the more spectral bands we can cover, the more expensive the data will be, but this is a trade-off that is necessary in some areas to make. Okay, so let's maybe very briefly get from theory to practice. So let's say we got hold of this multispectral data from a satellite and how we can use it to actually detect methane from these images. So for the purpose of this demonstration, I pulled the data from a satellite called Sentinel-2, and this is equipped with a pretty nice but very general purpose sensor, which registers 12 spectral bands. And we are focusing here on band 11 and band 12. So band 11 captures around 1600 nanometers, and band 12 captures around 2200 nanometers. And let me just quickly go a few slides back just to show you something I showed at the very beginning. So here band 11 and band 12 of Sentinel-2 are indicated here with these red bars. And you can see that there's a high overlap with these bands and low methane transmittance, which corresponds to high methane absorption. And this is why this band 11 and band 12 are commonly used for detecting methane on images collected by Sentinel-2 satellite. Okay, so back to practice. Upon quick inspection, we can see that in RGB, we cannot see much, and you probably cannot see much on band 11 and band 12 either, but I'll tell you what to do in order to see a little bit more. Okay, yeah, so we observe that despite both of these bands are super sensitive to methane, band 11 is slightly less sensitive overall. So with some simple computer vision techniques, we can effectively compute some weighted difference between those bands. And we see that the result is the region of enhanced methane concentration. Of course, not all of the purple regions here correspond to high, like to methane plume. This may be some, just naturally increased level of methane or like some measurement noises. But interesting part is the central part of the image, which is clearly forming some sort of, methane plume. And we know that this is a methane plume because we are aware that there is a large oil and gas emitting, like methane emitting facility located at this particular area. What is worth mentioning is that this image is not fully usable without further analysis. So from this picture only, we know that something is happening within the image, potentially methane plume, but we don't know how to interpret these values and what kind of physical meaning they have. And just a brief note that there exists this entire field of physics called spectroscopy that tackles this sort of challenges with some complex tools like being able to analyze the content of the atmosphere, or maybe taking into consideration the day when the picture was captured. They can actually transform this colorful image into actual values of parts per million, which is an actual physical values that can be used to run more advanced algorithms in order to perform even more accurate analysis of methane. Okay, this previous example only covers usage of 2 spectral bands to detect methane, but what happens if we have more measurements available? There are certain types of satellites that will provide us with better spectral resolution, and the spectral resolution can be used to precisely kind of assess the presence of methane and its exact concentration. So the way we usually do it is we analyze so-called spectral signatures of methane. So we can draw such a plot for every pixel in our image, and once it has been done, we can use spectroscopy again to find out how light is supposed to behave upon passing through methane. And we can compare this expected behavior with the measurements we taken by the satellite. And based on that, we can easily figure out which pixels correspond to high methane concentration and which do not. So this is how it's usually done. So on this plot, you can see that the practical behavior, which is the red curve, is not ideal. It doesn't follow the theoretical blue behavior ideally, but it's still enough to distinguish the spots of high concentration of methane. Okay. So I mentioned to you that having actual values of parts per million, this is really important. And I'll try to explain to you why this is important. So I would like to take a note here that the companies don't usually care about parts per million because this is not yet that meaningful. What they actually care about is kilograms per hour. This is the actual quantity that allows the companies to understand how severe is the methane leak and how quickly they are supposed to attend it in order to repair it. So small leaks like up to, let's say, 5 kilograms per hour may sometimes be left unattended, while those that are above 100 kilograms per hour impose significant penalties upon the companies, so they would rather fix it in a matter of days. So the question is how to calculate the rate from this raw parts per million concentration. So in fact, I won't go too deeply into details because this is pretty scientifically heavy, but I will describe the main process to you. In the first step here, what we do, we simply perform all the things I mentioned to you already. So we basically want to acquire this concentration map. And this plume present on the concentration map has to be extracted in the second step. We would like to slice the plume in this crosswind direction. And this is done in order to figure out how much methane passes every second through the area that is perpendicular to the wind direction. And this information is analyzed as shown in this plot underneath the step 3. And this actual model, physical model that we used for this calculation is called Gaussian path model. More about this model can be found on the web. This is super popular because this is really effective and simple model. Once again, I won't go into details, but the takeaway here, the takeaway here is if we combine these raw measurements of ppm with the Gaussian path models, we can figure out what is the emission rate in kilograms per hour, and this is the meaningful value for the clients. Okay, you may probably wonder why this crosswind slices are only taken, why the wind speed is so important in all this equation. And the answer is included in this picture. You can see like 2 facilities emitting some sort of gases, probably not methane because we wouldn't be able to see it in this RGB image. But these facilities are set apart by 4 miles, which is a bit more than 6 kilometers. Despite this relatively small distance, right, this plume emitted from one of the facilities goes sharply to the right, while the plume emitted from the other facility travels almost straight up. This is why having accurate estimates of the wind speed and direction is so important for calculating the emission rate of methane. The question may arise, what if this is not enough to have satellite images? So for example, some plumes may be so small that they are not even visible from the satellites, or maybe we want to have this reliability also on the cloudy days. In that case, a popular choice is to employ drones. Drones can, first of all, fly much closer to the object and provide extremely high spatial resolution. And this, in turn, helps in finding small, tiny methane emissions. To have some sort of comparison, I provided these 2 images of the same methane emitting facility. This is a well pad that is used to extract oil from under the ground. And this image on the left has been acquired by state-of-the-art satellite on a sunny, ideal conditions, while the image on the right has been acquired, I mean, this is also in sunny conditions, but with just a moderate quality drone during a routine survey. You can already see that the level of detail is completely different within those images. So this is the main superpower of using drone for performing methane detection activities. So the capability to flying close to the object allows for acquisition of the great quality of data. Even if the sensor is of limited quality, the quality of the resulting data will be still better than the satellites. Not only that, but the drones can register the videos, while most of the satellites can only produce, single snapshots at a given point of time, which results in a single picture being acquired. You probably might have guessed that operating drones is quite a bit more expensive than just buying some satellite pictures. However, once you do pay for the data, the assessment of the leaks is expected to be way more detailed than the one that can be done with satellites. Again, the drawbacks of using drones are about their inability to carry on large, expensive sensors on board because they are usually heavy, and drones are limited in that sense, so they cannot cover everything. Because of that, they usually are equipped with the sensor that only registers single infrared band. And also drones are pretty unstable, which makes the analysis of the videos a little bit hard to do. So here you can see an example of such a video recorded by a drone. So there is a methane leak emerging from this tank, and this is clearly visible as a cloud on that video. Okay, so we already agreed that we have to deal with very unstable videos, and thankfully there exist, computer vision techniques that allow for stabilizing such videos and performing further analysis of, for example, finding methane plume and calculating the emission rate associated to them. So in order to stabilize the video, we have to revert the relative movement between the frames of the video. The way it is done, this is by finding so-called key points on the image. And these are some characteristic points that can be easily found on every frame of that image and matched between the frames of the image so that the movement between the images can be found. And this is how the key point finding and matching between some frames of the videos can be visualized. So the left is the first frame of the video, and the right-hand part are the subsequent frames of the videos, and the connections are just the corresponding key points found between the images. Having enough of this, matched key points between two frames allows us to calculate so-called transformation matrix, which describes the movement between the frames. The meaning of such a transformation matrix is pretty simple. So this is basically how should I move and rotate the camera in the frame number 1 to achieve the same view as seen on the frame number 2. And this transformation matrix can be then reverted and applied to transform the frame in order to stabilize the video. You can see that the video on the left used to be pretty unstable with most of the major equipments like tanks moving here and there. And it makes it super difficult to analyze such a video from a computer vision perspective. However, upon being stabilized, everything appears pretty static and it makes the whole analysis way easier. Okay, so like I said, once the video has been stabilized, it can be used for further processing. So in this case, what we cared about was to highlight the methane plume visible on the video. We applied various computer vision techniques that allow us to do it, and stabilization was just first of the techniques we used. And the features we were looking for include movement of the gases or large kind of blobs of darker regions. And we just designed this algorithm to detect this sort of features and highlight these areas. So you can see the result is pretty satisfactory. It nicely highlights the plume of methane. And this is because we first had to perform the stabilization step. And upon doing this, we could have added additional processing step on top of this video. And that was the final product that we achieved through applying all these techniques. Okay, so for this part, I would like to diverge a little bit from the topic of observing methane plumes. And of course, being able to detect leaks of methane was the first step in preventing them from happening. But there are other areas where technology can help in tackling global warming. So in recent years, we had many pledges that have been signed by different countries and companies to reduce their methane emissions. In order to control this process, methane reporting programs were introduced by the governments. Usually, these reports are pretty complicated and difficult to organize because there's an abundance of data from different sources that have to be taken into consideration by the workers of this company. At SoftServe, at MethaneX, we aimed at helping the companies to organize their data, but also to better control their emission and automate the process of reporting the emissions. In order to achieve that, we have built this integrated reporting system. And at the heart of the system, we placed a cloud-based data warehouse for storing methane-related data. In order to feed the data into this cloud storage, we considered various connectors from many different sources, because I already told you that the sources for feeding this sort of systems are very versatile. So this includes aerial surveys, handheld cameras, information from users about the equipment, about the site in general, and also the SCADA, which are the systems that kind of control the processes that happen on the oil fields. Upon combining all of this data and processing them, we have enough information to calculate methane emissions of a given facility. And this data can be stored in the data warehouse. This is one thing, but they can be used to produce methane reports that are compliant with existing standards that are required by the governments. To give you one example of such automatic processing that can be used for populating the reports required by the government, in this slide I included a frame extracted from the optical gas imaging video that was captured by a handheld camera. And this metadata extracted from the video includes the type of the camera that was used in the survey, time of the survey, and the coordinates of the facility. And all of this data can be automatically used to populate certain cells in the spreadsheet report that is required by the government. And the alternative that is commonly employed nowadays would be to employ a worker to manually fill in all the data. So we can already see how much automation can be included in these processes. Just to give you a brief introduction, we also built a demo system to showcase these functionalities. So here you can see this automatic processing, so this input pipelines, where we can select some files, select the facility upon which the files should be uploaded, types of the data that we upload, and our backend will automatically process the data and feed it into the warehouse. On the other side, we can generate various reports for different facilities, and this allows us to really have these tailored reports for every single facility that is under this system, and this is fully compliant with the up-to-date standards of the different organizations that require those reports. Other than that, we also built some dashboards that allow the user to see what are the emissions, to track them over time. So if you click here on the facility, you can actually find out what were your historical reports and emissions, what gases you emitted, not only methane, but also other greenhouse gases, and also what were the sources of this emission. We also have a separate dashboards for LDAR summary, which is leak detection and repair. And this basically gives you information what types of equipment were leaking and how well you do at repairing them. So this is just what we built. This is a demo. It can be accessed online as well. Okay, so we are getting close to the end of this technical part. But I would like to very briefly describe some awesome work that was done by the part of our team. So far, we were only mentioned detecting and reporting methane. However, technology can help us also in understanding the propagation patterns of the methane and other gases as well, and also to build digital twins of methane emitting facilities to further optimize and predict certain behaviors. So in this video, you can see we used Omniverse platform to build a model of oil and gas extraction site. So all the pieces of equipment, including wells, tanks, etc., were modeled in Omniverse environment. And on top of that visualization, we also employed some computational model that calculates the emissions that are related to each piece of equipment, and then the emissions are simulated with the computational fluid dynamics in order to be visualized and predicted. So you can see this is the actual prediction of emission made in by computational fluid dynamics, but also overlaid on top of this Omniverse simulation. So I think this is an awesome work, which also can help companies to understand their emissions. All right. So that would be the end of my part of the presentation, and let me hand it over to Hatem.
Well, thanks everybody for participating. It's a true pleasure. I'm Hatem Nasser. I'm the Global Director for Energy, Oil and Gas, and Industry Success Leader. It's been an honor to work with this team. Amazing work. To put things in context here, first of all, before I talk about the general business aspect and our focus in SoftServe, this was a new focus for us in SoftServe. So really in 1 year, we were able to really put together a lot of great solutions out there that are very critical to this subject of emission data management. So as Jack said earlier on, the environmental urgency here is very clear. If anybody of you has followed the COP28 that was recently held in Dubai, most of the discussions were centered around methane emission. it is of the highest urgency. The industry, oil and gas, and not only oil and gas, but as well as other industries, utilities, and as well as manufacturing to some extent, have to worry about all of this because of the impact on Earth warming. So when we talk about the whole concept of ESG, right? What is E? E is environment, and S are the two key, the sustainability factor. So when it comes to emission, there are three fundamental components that the industry has to deal with, right? First and most urgently is the methane, specifically methane measurement, all right, and detection and quantification, right? That's number one. Number two is transformation, right, of methane, because you can transform methane. Remember, methane is CH4. You have 4 hydrogen molecules. You can take hydrogen and it can transform it into a fuel, all right? This is not green hydrogen, it's what we call blue hydrogen. And then the third aspect of it is sequestration, capture and sequestration, where you can capture, the emissions and you can store it underground, especially CO2 that we can reuse for a variety of purposes, okay? But in order to do this, you have to start by measuring and detecting, and there are a lot of technologies that are out there today. Historically speaking, right, for many decades, we've been using very rudimentary methods to, measure and report methane. I cannot even use the term measure because mostly for reporting methane, which what we used to for many decades, we still do that till today. That's the most prominent way, is to use emission factors, right? What are our emission factors that are based on models to say, okay, your compressor of this size will emit so much methane, right? Your tank will emit so much methane. Your separator will emit so much methane. And there is a formula and there is a number associated with it. And this is how a lot of companies do. This is how many compressors I have. This is how many valves I have. This is how many tanks I have. And they add up the numbers. But this is no longer enough. The industry realized the sense of urgency to do more precise measurement, not only precise measurement, but more continuous measurement, okay, of methane. So we in SoftServe, we don't build, the drones, we don't build the satellite, sensors, we don't build the IoTs, we don't build the OGI cameras. Our business is software, obviously, as you well know. So we focus more in this initiative on the data management aspect. And what do we mean by data management is what Mikolai was showing you, the idea of measuring, reporting, quantification, okay, modeling. And so this has been a tremendous effort by the team. I really want to commend the team for amazing work. Considering we're still young, we're learning. By the way, we're not the only ones learning. Everybody's learning in the industry. This is a continual learning process, especially as new technologies are becoming available, and not only available but getting approved. Right, so things like drones, for example, are just recently getting approved by institutions like the EPA. Right. So there are some new technologies out there that are not only with satellites, with drones, but even using airplanes to do measurements, different type of sensors, from infrared to lidar to saying all sorts of things. So we want to continue the work in SoftServe. We do have a plan. We have identified several high priority areas for 2024, if the budget allow, and hopefully we get some funding to continue. One of them is the area of precisely quantification using, for example, visible, cameras and TLAS, which is using laser, combining the two to do two information together, being able to use computer vision, not only to say, okay, this is what's being emitted here, but exactly to be able to label the equipment to say it is, you know, this much methane is being emitted from a tank, okay, from a separator, from a compressor, to be able to do automated recognition of those objects and to label them. So we have a lot on our plate. It's pretty complex work. One thing I have to say that I am really, really happy and proud, you know, that we have secured great partnerships with some amazing companies. One of them was mentioned, you know, by you know, when we showed you the data here, you know, Satellytics that Nikolai talked about, and the other one with aerial production services. Satellytics is a true industry leader in satellite data analysis, and they use different satellites. Okay, they don't use a single satellite. You know, the one that you saw with Worldview, but they use, you know, other type of, from Maxar, from Airbus, from, you know, from Planet, and the other company is Aerial Production Services, who are true leaders in drone inspections, and they have flown more drone flights than any company in the U.S. So we need such partners to give us the data, right? Because anytime you're doing this type of R&D work without data, it's, you know, you cannot achieve any goal. So we plan to continue the work. We did something fantastic this year, and we basically completed, you know, we had a milestone which was completed in November, middle of November. So we just freshly finished. We put some, you know, integrated demos together. And now we're going to start talking to clients, and we're going to start to show them what we have done. And hopefully this would lead some to discussions and potentially some projects and proof of concept. So with that, I'll leave a few minutes for any Q&A. If anybody has any questions for any of us, please go ahead.
Thank you, Hatam. Thank you, team. I would say amazing delivery of the key aspects of MethaneX project and the problem it faced with. Probably the first question I want to ask is, what are the current challenges or probably even limitations in terms of adopting the automated continuous report measurements by key industry players? Are there technical, legal, in terms of complying and creating the needed law base in terms of different organization, or it's still too much expensive and less valuable in short-term period of time? So yeah, that will be the question. So
Let me take a crack at it, Nikolai, or you want to? I'll answer part of it, and you can add.
Yeah,
so
go ahead.
so
Go for it.
the question here is, there are challenges. There are obviously some challenges. So one thing you mentioned, Bonam, is continuous. Okay, there aren't too many continuous meaning you put a camera there that is continuously monitoring and measuring, right? Most of the technology right now, OGI cameras that are handheld, that they are doing the inspections on a, once a month or once a quarter, whatever, right? And there are some regulations here that you have to do it, okay? The drones, obviously, they're not continuous. They fly them once a month or once a quarter, whatever. Satellites also is not continuous. So, but the challenges are a lot of these technologies, there are certain benchmarks for measurements, right? You have to validate that, right? By certain institutions like University of Colorado, METAC has a lab where you say, I can detect up to down to 4 kilograms per hour or 2 kilograms per hour. So the technology is evolving, is proving. It has to be approved by the EPA, and there is always a new regulation. But like Nikolai said, the key number right now by the EPA is what we call 100 kilograms per hour. 100 kilograms is our super emitters. And there are many systems that can do that. The question is, are they non-continuous? A lot of oil companies, by the way, they have a really serious initiative. They want to move to continuous. There are still many technical challenges with the sensors, with the processing of the data, the computer vision aspects, the accuracy of the measurement. So there is no clear leader in any of this, like Mikolai said. Hey, Mikolai, you want to add anything to what I said?
Yeah. Thank you, Hatem. You touched upon the legal aspect, and I would like to add a little bit, just very quickly, about the technological part here. So, oil and gas industry is a very traditional type of industry, and the adoption of the new technologies is pretty slow there. And this imposes a few things. So we have these new regulations. We have the technology to even meet the regulations and how the companies adapt to the regulations, but the time required for this company to digest this new technologies is really, really long. So every time, like the more time I meet with the companies, I have a feeling that, first of all, they used to do almost everything manually with respect to this reporting. And it imposes that, within the documentation they already have there, that would be needed to be transferred into some cloud environments and automated system. There's a huge mess there, and in order to figure it out, it's probably already like a few months of a project. Not only that, but they use different sensor, different sources of data, and they would like to respond to different reporting programs. That means they all need a customizable solution, whereas all what they're looking for are some ready-made solutions. And this is a problem. This is really tricky because from one side, that there doesn't exist, but you can see those companies still pursuing some ready-made off-the-shelf solution. So this is, like from business perspective, this is really difficult. That's why MethaneX is an accelerator, where we have started something. We have the core, and then we have the flexibility to build upon this to introduce new input data and output data pipelines. So this is like a brief answer from the technological perspective limitations.
Thank you for answering. Until we have 2 minutes more, I see a question in the chat. Such an interesting and urgent to be implemented topic. Best wishes for 2024 from this technology to continue to grow, and thank you all for sharing this information that help us to transform and continue to work on helping on our environment. The comment from Tatiana. Thank you, Tatiana, for your warm wishes. And the last 1 minute question before we go, just super short. Do you observe any influence from large language models on the improvements, on the challenges from technical perspective, like the current solution are facing with, like, I know, diffusion models for image classification, or some kind of automatic report generation, or I don't know, or something like that?
One thing we did not show, that we have a very cool demo on using generative AI for the LDAR, leak detection repair, where we applied it to extracting the data from Satellytics and being able to come up with a plan how to repair, given certain constraints. So we do have a demo there. We have a video, but Gen AI definitely plays a role.
Yeah,
okay.
Just 1 second from me. On the other hand, like, it can help in many different factors. Like LDAR is a perfect application for large language models. On the other hand, we have to be really careful because we are dealing with regulations, and LLMs are known to hallucinate some stuff. So if you ask it for some very specific regulation, it may just make it up. So we have to be careful in implementing directly, like, so for example, using LLMs for directly for reporting. This is probably a little bit tricky because you want to be careful just to follow the regulations straight away, while LLMs may do some weird stuff over there. So this is just a small remark from me.
Thank you, everybody.
Yeah, thanks for all of your remark. Thank you for today's session. Please, if you have any question, reach out all our speakers. Thank you for your active participation, and see you next time. Bye-bye, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.